Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa, and I am the secretary at the Historical Society of Frankfurt. And welcome to our December lecture presentation and hopefully some holiday cheer at the end. We normally would be very grateful to have you in our lecture hall and celebrating with you the joyful times of the year, but hopefully we can convey that over the streaming tonight after our lecture. So for tonight, we have our very first actual guest that is not part of the membership or board of Historical Society, and it is author Alan Hornblum. He's going to be presenting his book. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. The Holmesburg Prison Murders. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. I just didn't have it up on my screen. But quickly, I did want to give you a little rundown of who Alan Hornblum is. He is the author of 7 books ranging in scope from organized crime and Soviet espionage to medical ethics and sports. His work has been featured on news shows such as the CBS Evening News, Good Morning America, Court TV, and the BBC, CNN, as well as most newspapers, including the front pages of the New York Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer. He has also lectured at a cross-section of institutions, including the British Medical Association and National Institutes of Health, the FBI, and a host of colleges and medical schools, including Brown, Columbia, and Princeton universities. Prior to his decision to investigate and write books about controversial and long-neglected subjects, Hornblum had a long career in law enforcement, working in the Philadelphia prison system and sheriff's office, as well as the Pennsylvania Crime Commission. You, our audience, may remember Alan from a lecture he gave on one of his other books, American Colossus, biography of tennis great Bill Tilden. In that work, he discussed how Tilden, arguably the greatest athlete to come out of the upper class, transformed the game of tennis from a leisure activity to the well-to-do and popular sport of the masses. So I am going to bring Alan on screen here. Alan, you are unmuted and you are here with us. Hi, how are you?
Good. I am good. I am once again appreciative of being asked by the Frankfurt Historical Society to embarrass myself in public again. But I would like to say I do appreciate any folks I run into who manage to turn off reruns of Laverne and Shirley and spend some time reading books or paying attention to authors propagating and illuminating some forgotten or controversial aspects of American or world history. My little niche apparently has become old and forgotten or even never known stories about Philadelphia, be it individuals or groups or events. And I'm doing that once again with a title that I'll remind Vanessa of called The Klondike Bake Oven Deaths.
Okay, my sincere apologies. I didn't have the title up in front of me, and I just kind of I winged it there.
Well, don't worry about it. I'm going to forget half of my talk, and that's where you're going to have to step in and deliver it.
Ooh, fun.
So, yes, but it's the Klondike Bake Oven Deaths.
Okay.
And it's an interesting and very dark tale. It's certainly not your seasonal Christmas tale. It's not a Jimmy Stewart, picture for Christmas Eve. This is a very dark story, and it's also one that very, very few people know of. I've gotten a kick over the years when I've told it to various people, friends of mine or acquaintances, who consider themselves knowledgeable and well-versed in Philly history, when they come out and say, wow, I never heard of that. Are you sure that's true? How could I have missed that? Well, they did miss it. And just as I delved into things that I knew of, was curious about, went to read more about it, found out there wasn't anything on it, I then threw myself into it. Examples of that are the Holmesburg Prison medical experiments. Another example is the story of Harry Gold, a little South Philadelphia chemist who gave the secrets of the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. Bill Tilden, absolutely stellar, great athlete out of the Germantown section of Philadelphia. He was an iconic figure of the 1920s and 30s. Very few people, even tennis players, don't know anything about him. So there's a lot of these interesting little nuggets out there that I've delved into and ended up writing articles and books and giving presentations on. And this latest one is another in that series. The only qualifying statement I should make, I guess, is that it's a little bit different than the others. And this is my first attempt, my maiden voyage, as Vanessa likes to posture, in the world of historical fiction. So it's a little bit different than my others. I wanted to try my hand at fiction, but because my head is so geared to facts and actual events, anybody who reads it is going to think it's nonfiction. But I have toyed with and teased some aspects of the story, deleting some things, adding others, but it still sticks very, very close to what actually happened. So rather than bore you any further with my attempt to become Stephen King, I will launch into the very notorious Homesburg or Klondike Bake Oven deaths.
So right before you get started there, I am just going to announce to our viewers that as previously, we are able to see comments, and we encourage them, absolutely. So please comment. I won't be interrupting Alan during his presentation with the comments necessarily, but we will absolutely take a look at them afterwards. And if you have any questions, please put them up there. If we can answer them, great. And as always, if not, we'll look into them and we'll see if we can find some info on it later on.
Okay, well, that's fine, Vanessa. Anytime you want to jump in.
Well,
I'm getting up in years, so I could always use a rest. But, we're going to go back in time to the Depression era, late in the Depression. I'm talking 1938.
And I'm going to turn the whole screen over to you right now.
Okay. Very good.
Oops, there we go. That's you.
It's the summer of 1938, and it's a brutally hot summer. And the prison, Homesburg, up in the Northeast, which all the viewers are familiar with, was having another series of problems because the facility was terribly overcrowded. When I was working there and in the other Philly prisons, when it hit 1,000, 1,100, it was thought to be overcrowded and problematic. Well, when you go back into the decades of the mid 1900s, you see 1,100, 1,200 was light. In fact, they were very often between 1,400 and 1,500 prisoners. So that means cells that were designed to hold one person had 3, 4, occasionally 5 individuals in a cell. Those cells are very stark. There is certainly no air conditioning, never was. And those walls in Homesburg and the other prisons tended to intensify whatever the weather was like outside. If it was 90 on the street, it probably felt 95 to 100, at least on a cell block. If it was 30 degrees on the street, it probably was 20 to 25 degrees on the cell block. So that's part of Homesburg's stone structure, and it made it very tough to serve time in and to work in. And in 1938, you had 1,500 very uncomfortable inmates and about 100 guards, officers, administrators. And what you would learn if you go back into the files and the newspaper clippings, you will see that something was almost endemic in those early decades into the 40s, maybe the 50s, and that was prison food strikes. Inmates wouldn't necessarily riot over the quality or the portions or the variety of food, but they would go on strikes where they would not go down to the mess hall and eat. This was a recurring tactic that inmates used to try and get larger portions or a greater variety. And this was attempted in mid-August, the second, third week of August. And it sort of unsettled the administrators because a very high percentage, well over half the institution, decided not to go down to the mess hall. So whenever inmates get organized, it's a threat to the managers, the administration, and they tried to crack down on it in various ways, cutting off visits, cutting off outside exercise and things of that nature. And that only pissed off the inmates even further. So you had this escalation of tension and problems. But what really caused the administration to go off the tracks is that this strike caught the attention of the media. Front page articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer, but also the New York Times and other papers around the country about a disturbance at Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia. And this very much embarrassed not only the prison leadership, but the mayor of Philadelphia, who was very interested in running for higher office. He had governor in mind, and he did not brook any opposition from anybody, be it the opposition party or his own party. And if you go back into the records in the newspapers, you will see that back in the 20s and 30s, Philadelphia was an extremely corrupt town. If you were a cop and weren't being paid off in some manner, in some way, there was probably something wrong with you, because it seems that everybody was on the take. There were allegations of corruption. There were investigations into corruption. And it was just a very unruly, corrupt town. And what occurred in the aftermath of the New York Times and the front page Inquirer article is that the leadership of the prison, William Mills, and the warden of Homesburg, individual by the name of Craven, decided to pull out the perceived leaders of the strike, which started on the second week of August. And on August 19th, a Friday, they pulled out 4 or 5 perceived leaders of the strike. They took them off the cell blocks where they resided, and they moved them to a separate building between 2 different cell blocks. I believe it was D and E block. And they had a small unit there. They called it an isolation unit, an isolation block. It was, in the minds of the prisoners, a pure punishment block, and the inmates had given it its own nickname, the Klondike. The Klondike was very small. It was only 50 feet long and only had a dozen cells. Half of those cells were already being used as storage for various odds and ends, be it tables, be it chairs, be it painting equipment, maintenance equipment. So they only had 5 or 6 cells available, and they threw in initially 5 or 6 inmates. The next day, Saturday the 20th, they threw in another 5 or 6, and they threw in a few more, so that by Sunday, they have 23 inmates in 5 small cells that only have a sink and a toilet. Now, here is where it really gets fairly barbaric. This unit, this punishment unit known as Klondike, apparently was definitely used to punish the inmates in a very unique, almost medieval way. What they would do periodically, and they certainly did it here over this weekend of the 19th to the 21st, the weather outside is 95 degrees every day. There's been hot spells all summer long. There's a sustained one in August. What they do is they shut the ceiling vents, they close the windows, they shut off the water to the sink and the toilet, and then they turn up the heat in several banks of very large radiators. There are 7 radiators in a small building, and when you turn up the heat and shut the vents and close off access to water, it really became quite a horrendous place. Guards would periodically come in, give inmates a cup of water 3 times a day, and a slice of bread, moldy bread or bread that was hard as a rock. That would be it. They were supposed to have visits by the prison physician every day, but that was stopped. So that on the morning of Monday the 21st, when many of the guards and the doctors come back from their weekends, they open those doors to those very, very extremely hot cells, and you end up with half of the men unconscious and a good number of them dead. This causes great alarm in the prison system. The superintendent, Mills, has the doctor rush over there, contacts the coroner downtown to come up, contacts the police commissioner and the mayor, and you start to have the beginnings of a great conflagration in Northeast Philadelphia. The police come up, they make their report, and it's a little mind-boggling. They pay no attention to the heat, the lack of water, the lack of any ventilation, and it's their determination from their investigation that the men, the prisoners, died from attacking each other, that they were overexcited, that they were overworked, and that there was a disagreement amongst them about ending the strike or maintaining it, and the inmates killed themselves. This cuts against the grain of what the coroner and his people discover. They recognize the unbearable heat in the unit. You could not miss it. They also have learned that the vents were closed, the windows were closed, there was no water. The place smells to high heaven because the urine and feces was all over. It could not be flushed. And they pull out a number of bodies and a number of others who are in very, very bad shape. But as I told you earlier, this is a very corrupt town back in the 30s. And right away, there is major contention between the police, who come up with one theory as to what happened, which is supported, of course, by the superintendent and the warden, and the coroner. And very quickly, I'm just going to flash some actual newspaper headlines so that you can see the front page coverage that this received at the time, the very next day, Monday afternoon and evening, and then Tuesday morning. These are actual photocopies of headlines from the papers at that time: Daily News, Bulletin and Inquirer, the Philadelphia Record, and the Public Ledger. This was front page stuff. And you also have reporters coming in from around the country about this. It is capturing headlines and radio stories around the country. And very quickly, it is being perceived as being one of the worst, if not the worst, instance of prison abuse in American history. And pages, not just the front page, but page 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 are totally devoted to this horrendous crime that has taken place on Tarsdale Avenue in Northeast Philadelphia. Heat killed 4 prison victims. Cellmates accuse guards. Let me read to you quickly how some reporters covered this. This is from the Public Ledger, and it's Wednesday morning, the 24th of August, written by a John McCullough. Heat killed 4 prison victims. Cellmates accuse guards. Steam turned on in block. Weakened hunger strikers unable to protect cells. This is how ghastly death came to 4 convicts whose lifeless bodies were dragged from punishment cells in the county prison at Homesburg Monday morning, the Inquirer learned from a variety of reliable sources last night. Every window in the concrete boxcar-like structure was closed. Heat was turned into the radiators. 23 men were jammed like cattle into 10 cells, each measuring 4 feet wide by 9 feet long by 8 feet high. 4 of the 23 ringleaders, violent exhorters of their fellows to continue a hunger strike, to continue the disorder, to rattle the grilled doors of their cells, to make the place echo with their curses and their protests. Those 4 were undernourished, weakened by overexertion, and they died like rats in a trap from their own violence and the appalling heat. And it goes on to discuss the guards that they accuse of doing this and so forth and so on. What you also have to understand is that the town is totally dominated by the mayor at that time, Mayor Wilson, and he wants to shut everything down. He wants to shut the story down. He wants to make it disappear. And he is very willing to go along with the 2 detectives of the police department who have determined this was due to the inmates themselves attacking each other. The mayor does not let the police commissioner investigate, does not let the prosecutor get involved. He himself makes no statement. This is all of great frustration to the coroner, an individual named Charles Hirsch. Now, as I said earlier, my work is a piece of fiction, and I give names, different names to all of these individuals, and I give them different storylines and trajectories of their origin and how they came to take the positions they do. But because those of you from the Historical Society are basically into nonfiction, which of course I am myself, I'll stick to the straight line of the events. And if you're interested, my book should be coming out within the next month or so. As you can imagine, a lot of publishing schedules, as with everything else during the COVID era, have been negatively impacted. So I don't know whether the book will be out by Christmas or during the first month of 2021. But I go into a good bit of detail in the book. It's approximately 300 pages. And most of what I put down there about the case is accurate as it emerged and evolved. So this is a front page story around the country. Reporters are coming from the Washington Post and the Washington Examiner, the New York Times, Long Island. They're coming from Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and points near and far to cover this story. And it's often written about as the worst case of prison abuse in American history. The mayor threatens the coroner because the coroner ends up talking to the media that is gathering every day outside the prison, trying to get into the prison, trying to cover the story. The superintendent does not let them in. The mayor doesn't want them in. The mayor wants everybody to leave the area. He wants the story to disappear. But when you have something of this nature, this sort of calamity, it's tough to push under the rug, as the mayor was so successful in doing with regard to the gambling, the prostitution, the organized crime, the cops on the payroll. That was going on in spades. There were investigations, there were investigations. Very few trials took place. If they did, the sentences were relatively minor. It was really pretty dark. And I think most of you know what Lincoln Steffens said about Philadelphia and its attachment to corruption. The interesting part here for me, and I think anybody who pursues this story, is the individual Charles Hirsch, who I give a different name in the story and a different origin and evolution. But Charles Hirsch is the coroner of the third largest city in the country, which Philly was at that time. He is not a college graduate. He is not a man of the medical arena. No degrees. He is a party man. He was picked by the party leadership to run for that office. Surprisingly, even though he was attacked when he's first elected as being untrained, unschooled, not appropriate for the job, this is an example of where the common man, the untutored man, but the well-intended man, rises to the occasion. Because where everybody else wants to bury this case and push it under the rug, Hirsch is so horrified by what has happened and the belief that prison administrators and guards tortured these men that he initiates something that was very rare and unusual at that time, and that was a coroner's inquest. Hirsch comes under tremendous pressure. The mayor is attacking him, telling him that he will run him out of office, that he will run somebody against him, that he will never get reelected. And you have to understand the mayor had tremendous power. The commissioner doesn't want to get in the case. The DA's office doesn't want to get in the case. But Hirsch believes a tremendous injustice has been done. There are a number of deaths. Many others are severely injured, and he pursues it. He investigates the crime, and it's just a very powerful story of one man against the system, taking place not in Saudi Arabia or not in Africa or in parts of England or wherever else. It's taking place in our Philadelphia, a lot of it in City Hall, the second floor of City Hall, and then a good portion of the book ends up on the 6th floor of City Hall, where the coroner's inquest takes place. So I think there's some fairly powerful courtroom scenes in there where they try and get at the truth, listening to the testimony of the witnesses, that being the guards and the inmates, and trying to discern who's telling the truth. So maybe this is where Vanessa, if you haven't fallen asleep on me, because I know I have a tendency to bore people, where you could throw up some of those shots and I can quickly explain why these negatives are so dilapidated and in bad shape. And they are old, 80-year-old acetate negatives. And these are the best ones. Most of the others are so crumpled and crimpled and decrepit, they literally fall apart in your hand into 1,000 different pieces. The ones I have here are ones I got from the Temple Urban Archives. So Vanessa, could you throw up the first picture?
Yeah, we've got Holmesburg Prison here. And I just as someone who's interested in photography, I just wanted to say to everyone that I fully appreciate the degradation of these images. I think it is actually quite beautiful, and it really represents the time that has passed. And even though they might be a little fuzzy, they still have a really wonderful impact. So enjoy, please.
This photo here, of course, I believe this would be the southwest corner of Holmesburg Prison. I think they have a cannery unit up there now, but you can see, vaguely make out the 1930s era cars parked by the wall there. Next picture. This is many of the pressmen from the city and around the country who come to cover the story on successive days. Next.
Oh, sorry, you went a little quickly there for me. Let me get number 3 here. There we go.
Okay. To the right, the taller gentleman without a jacket is William Mills. He is also at the center of this story, and he has quite an interesting historical arc. He's born in Upland, becomes a soldier. He fights in the Spanish-American War in the cavalry unit and is quite heroic according to most accounts. The gentleman in the center with the jacket, tie, and hat is Vincent Boyle. He is the chief assistant DA in the city, who finally is brought into the case. Next picture, please. This here is the trial, or actually the coroner's inquest. And if you hear rustling in the back, that is my 8-week-old border collie, obviously disagreeing with some of my verbal captions. And as you know, border collies are generally smarter than their owners. So I may get shoved out of this chair to have him tell you the story. Lex, stop that. But those couple front rows there, those stern-looking gentlemen, are the guards of the prison. Many of them have been given subpoenas to show up because there's been testimony against them that they have helped perpetrated the persecution and the conditions that existed in the prison. Courtroom 653 is one of the largest, or the largest in the city. It was one of the most ornate. Most of the big major controversial trials were held in this courtroom here. But once again, this was not a trial. This was a coroner's inquest. And it was the biggest event in town because this was a horrendous event. It had garnered pages and pages of newspaper coverage, lots of stirring photographs. So there were hundreds of people that came down and lined up to try and get a seat at this. Next, please. Those few people that look like they have their hands on a Bible, which I presume it is, they are the coroner's jury. They were prominent citizens of the time. Some were businessmen, some were women, political activists, who the coroner had selected to be on this very select coroner's jury to listen to the testimony and then determine how the inmates died. And then if they wanted to go further, they could suggest individuals who should be indicted and put on trial. Next picture, please. That is the jury in their seats listening to one of the witnesses. Again, you can see the condition of the photograph with blotches, looks like paint spatter. But again, these are 80-year-old negatives, and some of the others we will see are even worse. Next, please. This is an example of that. This is a negative that's slowly dissolving. And the two individuals are really the heavies of this story. That is the Superintendent Mills on the left and Warden Craven on the right. I didn't finish up saying that Mills was a big guy, and I believe he played fullback on either the initial or one of the early Temple University football teams. He drops out of school because academics wasn't his chosen line of work. He joins the police force around 1903 or 4, spends 30 years on the force, rising to the position of commissioner. Craven on the right started working in the prison in the 1920s. He rises to the position of warden, and he is number 2 under Mills. Mills was shifted from the police force to the prison system because the prison system periodically had problems, and Mayor Wilson comes up with the notion maybe Mills is a good enough administrator that I can shift him from one department to another and he can get the prison system aligned correctly. Next picture. Here we have a shot of Mills again at the coroner's inquest, and he's front and center of all of this. Very accomplished guy, and he was known to be fairly honest and competent, but here he is at the end of his career having to fend off some tremendous allegations of if incompetence, if not actual brutality in his treatment of prisoners. Next picture. Here we have Craven. I believe that's his attorney on the right of him. And you can see we have a crowded courtroom there. The initial testimony that they are listening to came from inmate survivors who recounted what happened to them. You also have the doctors who testify as to what they saw when they were called to that prison unit, the Klondike, on Monday morning, the 21st. And then you have the coroner's physician who gives a very detailed summary of what he discovered in the autopsies. And this is a critical part of the story because when the dead bodies are discovered, they shock everyone who sees them because they are not so much mangled or distorted as they are blue. They are indigo. They looked as if they were dropped from a distant planet on the Earth. And it was shocking to everyone, including the doctors and the coroner, because it's not usual that you see individuals that are blue from head to toe. So that also was a key part as a descriptor that all of the reporters coming to the city underlined in their accounts of what was found. Next picture, please. Here you have another negative that's falling apart. Hopefully you can make out 2 individuals, 2 guards, Smith on the left and Bro on the right. They are the guards who worked the cell block, the punishment block. And these were the individuals who saw the inmates over the weekend. The inmates pleaded with them to turn off the heat, to turn on the water, to open the vents, to shut the radiators. Over and over, They screamed that they were dying. They couldn't breathe. They were going to have a heart attack. These two guards, according to the inmates, just laughed at them and said, "This is what you get for causing a prison disturbance. You thought you had things bad in the main prison. Now you really know what bad is." So they are also subpoenaed, and they are facing some heavy criticism in front of hundreds of observers. Next picture, please. Here we have also, right before the inquest gets started, I think you can discern that these are some large, physically fit men. They are also part of custody. They are the Homesburg guards. Some of them are subpoenaed. Some of them are coming down to support their colleagues who are now being accused of, or potentially accused of, murder. Next picture, please. Here we have another shot of three guards listening to the testimony in the courtroom. Next picture, please. This here is a negative of a young woman who I believe is the wife of one of the deceased prisoners. Relatives were the first to testify because, for the record, the coroner wanted the inmates identified in this process. So the first ones to testify tended to be mothers or brothers or wives of the deceased. And their stories were very, very compelling, very emotional, bringing a lot of tears to those in the audience. And as I said, after they testified, the coroner then brought up the doctors to testify. Then they were followed by the victims themselves, if they survived, and then the guards. And there was just a lot of Q&A, and that tends to be a good portion of my account in the book as well. So I think that's the last photograph I have to show you. Some of your questions may get into the results of this. If you would like to hear that, I will state it. If you would like to read about it, you can purchase it. If anybody, including Vanessa, has a question, I will try to do the best I can to answer one of the most depressing and ugly chapters in Philadelphia penal history. And it occurred in 1938 in Northeast Philadelphia. So I'll leave it at that. And Vanessa, if you have any questions, I will entertain them.
First off, I just want to say, very well presented, and what a chilling topic, but also what an important one. One that I think Philadelphia needs to know about, and I think so few people probably do. So,
well, I worked in the system throughout the 70s, and I saw a lot of problematic things. And as most of your viewers may know, my first book dealt with what I saw on my first day in the Philly prison system, and that was the mass incarceration of and use of inmates as guinea pigs for medical experimentation. Yeah. That book that came out of 5 years of research, Acres of Skin, is now pretty much recognized as a classic in both medical ethics and penology. And what is so interesting is that that phenomenon of inmates used as test subjects went on for basically a quarter century.
My goodness.
And very few people at the time knew about it.
Yeah.
Fewer had a problem with it. And this was another story. Doesn't go on as long, but it was pretty dark, captured a lot of headlines around the country that I thought needed to be exposed, illuminated as well. And so, as I say in my lectures, and maybe even at your shop, those prison walls not only keep the inmates in, they keep the public out. and maybe even more so than the experiments, this very dark incident at Homesburg, even to the vast, vast majority of Philadelphians, they have no knowledge of it.
It's true. I had no idea, and I think I told you the other day. I commented on this topic to my coworkers, and no one had any idea. It's absolutely important, I think, especially in today's climate, to just acknowledge that this stuff happened, and whatever continuation of it is still around is there. So thank you for bringing this to light and for sharing it with us, no matter how dark it is for this time of year. I think it is still a very relevant story. We do actually have just a couple comments. One actual question. The first comment that was thrown out was when you were describing the corruption, somebody said, just like today. And I think that everybody can kind of agree with that.
Well, if you think there's corruption today, you would be staggered by the level of corruption back in the 30s. I mean, it was endemic, it was deep, it was widespread. And there were various investigations by the state as well as reformers in the city, and they had very little traction. Very little could be done about it. It was something that was part of the DNA of the city and the political milieu, as it were. So whatever we have today is a fraction of what went on back at that time.
Well, that's a really hopeful insight. So thank you for letting us know that. Yeah, hopefully we can focus on that instead of the corruption we think is all there. The same person also commented that their brother worked there, but I don't know at what time. And the final comment was, Brian Harris said that their grandfather was a guard at Holmesburg probably shortly after this, and he's wondering if you have a list of the guards that were involved. I guess he's curious to know whether his grandfather was involved with any of those guards.
I do have a good number of names. Basically, those guards who worked the punishment unit and were subpoenaed and had to be at the coroner's inquest. I do not have a list, the full complement. The prison had about 1,500 inmates. It had about 92, 96 guards and about another 10 officers, be they sergeants, captains, warden, what have you. What we could do is, if that individual sends you the name, you could pass it on to me, Vanessa, and I'll give you a heads up. But if he didn't get there until after this event, if he got there post World War II, it's unlikely he won't be involved in this story. He may be involved in another story. When I first started working there in the early 70s, there were some old timers who went back, and there were some individuals who knew about and may occasionally throw out the term Klondike, but there was nobody who had any great knowledge or recollection of it. It just had this, aura of being something very dark. That was a punishment unit, and if you screwed up, if you hit a guard, if you tried to escape, you could end up in Klondike. But no one really knew what took place. I knew an inmate. I knew thousands, actually. But one of them was an individual, Wesley Harper, who was in prison for killing a bank guard in a robbery about 1968, Roosevelt Boulevard and Red Lion Avenue. While he is waiting for his trial, he was one of a dozen or more inmates who were pulled out of their cells taken outside to this little structure. They're given blackjacks and hatchets and axes and told to demolish a building. Building was the Klondike.
Oh, wow.
So the building was up from when it was built in 1929 until around 69 or 70, when it is finally torn down. And if you go between D and E blocks now, you really have to know where it was located. Otherwise, you'll totally miss where the base of it was, because it's all been removed.
So is Holmesburg Prison where you did your teaching in a prison? I was reading that in your biography.
At the Philadelphia Detention Center, which is where the inmates, criminals are first brought when they enter the prison system. They stay there for a period of days or weeks, could even be years, in fact, and then they are sent, they either stay there or they're sent to the House of Correction or the Burg, Homesburg, depending upon their bail, depending upon the severity of the crime. So DC was the receiving prison. That was built and opened in 1963 on the closure of MoCo. Its formal name was Moyamensing Prison down at 10th and Reed. It's a very old structure that was in operation from about 1835 to 1963, replaced by the detention center.
That structure doesn't still stand, does it? I don't think it does.
Now is a mall. I think there's a supermarket and a number of businesses down there.
Okay. Wow. So interesting. Brian Harris did also just comment that the guard in question that was his grandfather was named Joseph McGowan, and he does believe it was after, so maybe not in any connection to your story.
No, I don't recall any McGowans. There certainly were a good number of Irish guards there, as there were Irish on the police department.
Yeah.
But he was too late for Klondike, and I was too late for McGowan.
Well, too late, maybe not too late, but an important story nonetheless. And what a good one. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, and really well done. I think this presentation—
I appreciate, your sense of humor, that you like to have a dark story every Christmas. So I'll have one for you in 2021. But I want to thank you and the organization for another chance to talk about another interesting piece of Philly and Northeast history.
Much appreciated, and we look forward to having you again. It's always a pleasure, and I hope you have fun taking care of your pup.
Yeah, we have to go out now. I'm under orders. No more of this verbosity. Let's get some exercise. All
right. Well, you take good care. We'll catch up soon.
Okay. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye. All right. So we're on to me. But I am actually joined by my fellow board members of the Historical Society of Frankfurt. So I'm going to let everybody chime in one at a time. I'm first going to unmute you, and then I'll let everybody get ready for their camera shot. So you are all unmuted: Diane, John, Susan, and Alan. And I'm adding you all to the stream now.
Hello.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Can you all hear me?
You're breaking up.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Well, hopefully the breakup won't last, and hopefully it's streaming well to everyone else. So I'm going to go ahead with our holiday cheer portion of the lecture this evening, and so glad that you're all here to join us. If everybody might remember, if they've ever joined us in the lecture hall during December, normally we have a Santa Claus and lovely holiday decorations, and we hope that you can all remember that in your hearts and just kind of virtually embrace it. So we're going to have a couple photos and some remembrances over the past year, and Let's see. What should we start with? Should we start with music or photos? Any requests?
Let's see photos.
Whatever you want to do.
All right. So let's do some photos. I'll start off with this one. This is a good one.
Yay.
Yay. This will get us right into the holiday spirit. This is our board member and vice president, John Hewitt, everyone, who gratefully dresses up as Santa Claus in the past couple years to bring us all joy.
Yes, I can remember coming in, ringing a bell, and thanks for Diane that asked me to dress up. And I'd come in and ring a bell, and all the attention was back to me, and I didn't know what to say after that. And Jim Young yelled out, "Where's your reindeers?" I said, "They're outside."
Oh, well, let's do a quick little bit of music here just to get us into the spirit. This is our Vice President, Jerry.
President.
I'm sorry, President. My apologies. This is our President, Jerry. I'm still thinking about Jim. With some tunes on his guitar. Oh, did I? Okay. There's the image. Yay, that's lovely. That really gets you in the spirit. That's nice. I'm so glad. So we've got Diane back.
I hear a kitty.
I hear a kitty too. We're gonna move on.
That's my kitty wanting to get up.
Oh yeah. All right. So we're going to move on to a couple video clips of some archival month this was, what was it, November or October of 2019?
I believe it was October.
I know it was 2019, but I couldn't tell you a month.
I think it was October.
Yeah. So here are just some nice things to remember from when we actually had our lecture hall open and people were able to join us in person.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Rizera. I'm the Frankfurt Watershed Partnership nonprofit working.
This is Robin Irizarry.
Our office is on Torresdale Avenue in the Old Globe Diverse. Many of you maybe have met me before at previous programs that we posted here and elsewhere around the neighborhood. The past several years, we've been doing a guided bus tour of the hockey, starting at Iron down by Juliana Golf Club, driving up to the only remnant of the headwaters of the hockey, and then cruising down by bus, stopping at different points of interest along the way, taking it back to the confluence of the Winnehaha and Sinconi, where Frankfurt is formed. This year, we're doing something different, something we're excited about. We're doing a Frankfurt Creek history tour. So starting at the same point, Iron but going the other direction, following the Frankfurt Creek down to the river. So I have flyers here to give to you all. The date for the tour is November 16th. It's going to be running from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. with lunch included. And some of the key points of interest are going to be starting at Iron there. We're going to be looking at the some of the points along the creek. There's the oldest house in Frankfurt, right by Monrath Park. There will be stop in at Frankfurt Arsenal and check things out there. We're going to make it down to the mouth. So this is exciting to say. I like saying this because a lot of people in the city don't get the connection, but you're going to visit both mouths of the Frankfurt Creek, right? Because the Frankfurt Creek was rerouted and now makes a more direct route to the Delaware River, like below the Betsy Ross Bridge. But we'll also be, following the length of the creek as it runs currently, and then swinging up and exploring the arsenal and the original mouth of the creek up at the Frankfurt Boat Launch on Homesburg Street there. So we're looking forward to an exciting day. We are just now publishing this, so you all have the first crack at each one of us. Information. So I'll start passing this out. A bunch of these. That way folks can, if you want to out there, I will set started.
So that was Robin Irizarry from TTF Watershed, or Tacony Frankfurt Creek Watershed, a wonderful staple of the community, but I'm not sure he's actually with the TTF Watershed, but I'm sure he still participates in the community, presenting at Archives Month. I wasn't there, but if anybody remembers him being there and remembering how lovely it was, chime in.
He really does some nice work now with, I think it's Tinicum Water people. And
Is it Tinicum?
Well,
Oh.
he's down that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always on Facebook whittling little birds out and showing them, and he does a fantastic job.
That's true. He's a really wonderful artist, and he I don't know if it's whittling per se. I think it might be a different technique, but he's fabricated beautiful spoons in a technique of carving out from single pieces of wood. And I've attended the actual presentation of it, although I must say I forget what the name of the technique is. But yeah, he's a pretty awesome guy. So we were thrilled to have him participate in some of our events.
He goes on, takes people on bird watches, and they go shooting cameras. He does a lot.
Yeah, he does.
He's heavily involved with his children too.
Yes, definitely, for sure. Let's see what else we've got in terms of clips here. So.
Oh, by the way, I did go on that Frankfurt Creek tour, and
I did too.
It was excellent, and we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. I think if TTF Watershed ever does that again, I encourage anybody who's available to do to participate in it. And if I am available, I definitely would as well. But I often work on Saturdays, so not so much luck from my part. But let's see what else we've got. All right, so here I think we've got Fred Marr.
My primary and children's book, but it was undoubtedly at the mouth of the creek. And many of these creek names, got their name from the village that was at the mouth of the creek. Lenape, indigenous people lived on the river at where the creeks entered the Delaware River, or the Lenape River, or the Lenape River, as the Lenape is called. And then the English called the Lenapes Delaware Indians, and Consequently called the river Delaware. So the Indians are living there at the mouth, at the where the creeks enter the Delaware. There's a creek. It was a village at Mount Frankfurt Creek, which wasn't, of course, named the Frankfurt Creek. It was named Aleskin Creek, but that may not be a Lenape word itself. So, but Oquesson was another village that was there at the mouth of Oquesson. So these creek names are getting their names from the village at the end of the creek. Exactly like our roads get their names now. Frankfurt Avenue obviously goes to Frankfurt. Oxford Avenue goes to Oxford Church, or through Oxford Township. This is also called Bristol Road, Frankfurt Avenue, right to Bristol. So in the same way, the creek's not very over. Not that the whole entire creek is laden, it certainly isn't. But it certainly is at the mouth of that creek. Today, there's a lot of landfill there, but 400 or 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, there was no landfill. It was very, very small and filled out at high tide. It's tidal, very kind of goes all the way up to Frankfurt Avenue. At high tide, the creek is filled up. And even at low tide, it didn't go down. It went down about 60 feet, got 10 feet of water, and then it's not going to lose at all. So it was just a huge wave. Is what it was, and that's what you did not get involved. There was slightly higher ground on the north or upstream on the Delaware side, and that's where the river that goes to the swamp. So that is where the name comes from. Where does which kind of sea or not the word of habitat?
Okay.
Does anyone else have difficulty hearing the sound?
Yeah, I think it's, everybody's background sound, it might be interfering with the video, so you might want to mute yourselves while the videos are playing. I don't always have the ability to do that, so feel free to do that yourselves.
Okay.
So I'm going to get the videos here.
No, the sound is quite breaking up.
Yeah, should I skip the videos and maybe just go to some photos?
Does anyone else experience
Yeah,
this?
they weren't too good.
They're
Every other word you could hear.
yeah.
Yeah, let's just jump to some photos and
Photos are good.
yeah, let's do some photos. So and this is going to be, I think, the highlight of our evening. I mean, aside from having a wonderful author with us, it's a real joy to remember our president of the few years past, Jim Young. And John Hewitt has been so wonderful to submit a few photos in remembrance of him. And his passing anniversary is coming up in just a few days. He put together this lovely little collage here of all of the documents from his passing. We definitely miss him dearly. And not to bring everybody down in the dumps again, but we're just remembering him and loving what he did for us and his energy that he had in the Historical Society, such as this. So he was present at many, many events. The picture on the right, I kind of stylized a little bit and put some brush strokes in it so that it's more of a almost painting rather than a photo. But he loved getting up in front of the crowd and presenting and being personable. That was definitely part of his thing.
And the one on the left was from Robbins in Julietta Park. I told Jim that was my first time on something like this. He said, "Don't worry." He said, "We'll just help me set up the tables, and you can take your camera and go take pictures," he said.
Yeah, he was an easygoing guy for sure. And I know he got a kick out of watching Andrew perform on his stilts when we had that presentation about the circus in Frankfurt. That's what this photo is here. I think that's a great one. Yeah, that's a really good shot. And I think this is again, is this also at TTF?
Yes.
TTF presentation? Yeah.
Yes. Jim would have a brochure in his, I don't know, on the left left side of the Historical Society, and then the book about the Yellow Jackets in the end.
Yeah. Oh man, was he passionate about those Yellow Jackets? Which is, I mean, it's definitely a huge draw to our organization. And just to shout it out, just in case anybody doesn't know that's watching, the Yellow Jackets were kind of the precursor to the Eagles, and we know all about them. We got lots of info about them. So if that strikes your interest, don't hesitate to give a shout. I think we will tie up with some more music here from our president, Jerry Kalenkowitz. We've got him playing on a dulcimer this time. And let's see. Just takes me a moment to get it up here. I think that's a lovely way to tie up our evening. Did everybody hear Jerry?
About the first few notes, the
Nothing.
introduction.
Oh, you didn't hear him at all?
No.
I heard a little bit, and then I thought I was supposed to mute, so I muted my mic, and then I didn't hear nothing.
Didn't hear
I turned my mic back on, and I still didn't hear nothing.
Oh,
a little
bummer.
glitch there.
All right, let's try again, because that was a really good one. Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties. Let's hear some dulcimer music. We're trying this again. Yeah.
Yeah.
There I am.
Okay. Did that work?
I
It was
Yes, I heard the whole thing.
Yay. Okay. That
it was sort of dropping out.
Oh, well, hopefully it didn't drop out for everybody. But at least we attempted some holiday cheer, right? Hopefully this doesn't go down as an absurd broadcast, but I think we all enjoyed it, and that's what counts. So thank you all for coming into the broadcast and joining. Thanks everybody for watching. I know we're down to fewer viewers right now, but that's understandable because this part wasn't quite as interesting. Hopefully everybody will view this for Alan Hornblum's lecture on his most recent work and find it as interesting as we all did, and such an interesting story. So Happy holidays to everybody. Happy holidays to my fellow board members.
Happy and healthy.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Indeed. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to sign off.
Bye.
Be safe and be healthy.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Indeed.
goodbye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Happy holidays.